Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Casual Krakoa, everybody. Thanks for joining here live. Let's get this baby started. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You're listening to the weekly Casual Krakoa, where we go through all the week's X-Men comics that come out that week, as well as, other fun stuff that might be going on in Marvel, in pop culture, in entertainment, etc., etc. I run the website, comicbookherald.com. I do YouTube videos here, a series called Crack Krakoa, talking X-Men comics. I host a podcast called My Marvelous Year, where we go through the history of Marvel Comics from its origins to today. And I do some creator interviews over on the Best Comics Ever podcast in a series called Creanitators. That is my deal. Tell me what yours is here in the live chat. If you're here listening, let me know if audio, video, and all that fun stuff is coming through okay. If we're having any issues, I want to hear about it so I can potentially correct them or conveniently ignore them if I don't know what to do. It could go either way. But seriously, thanks everybody who's hopping in live. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. I'm seeing here from Fabian, my favorite comic YouTube. Thanks so much. Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. It's YouTuber. Honestly, you could just call me a YouTube. That's fine. That's fine. I am YouTube. That's fair. I think that's fair. I think we can all agree. So, all right, get in your questions, get in your comments and your thoughts here, because today there's only two comics that came out. We have X-Men #9 and Devil's Reign X-Men #2. No Lives of Wolverine #4. I was shocked. Shocked, I say, that there was no Lives of Wolverine this week. It's been a weekly event going on for 10 weeks. It was supposed to be issue #4. Today, it looks like instead it's going to be, it looks like instead it's going to be next week with X Deaths #4 at the same time. So, okay, scheduling issues, right? It's a major thing. And that's my experience, at least. I don't know, maybe it's out there in the wild for other people, but I think that is what happened. So that's kind of a bummer, actually. Obviously, like, we've been talking here how X Deaths has been so interesting, but like, I do definitely want, I wanted X Lives today to see, okay, what is that series going to do? Is it going to connect the dots a little bit more with what's going on in X Deaths of Wolverine, or is it going to kind of keep doing its own thing? You know, and we're not going to find out, I guess, until next week. Now, next week there will likely not be a Casual Krakoa. I will be on the road doing some travel. Maybe I'll try and do a road Casual Krakoa. I don't know. Listen, if you all are in here telling me you need it, you need a double X Lives X Deaths Casual Krakoa from the vacation of yours truly, then maybe I will try to make it happen. But unless there's a lot of desperate pleas and just filling of my ego, this may or may not happen. But seriously, there's not that many comics today, so get in your questions, get in your thoughts. And definitely, give me some stuff to talk about with you all, because I don't know that I have that much. All right. But we do have some comics, so we're going to get into it. And I've already got some questions pouring in from those of you joining live here in the chat. So thanks so much for doing that. A quick reminder, you can find me, comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald on Twitter and Instagram. Like, subscribe, join the channel, all this stuff. If you're here, you like these chats, you like the content, you like this general approach talking about comics, check it all out, because there's good stuff out there, right? I'm seeing Open Mike Eagle in the chat. Thanks for joining. Desperate plea. That's fair. Listen, I'm wearing the desperation on my sleeve. I just need some positive affirmation today. That's all I'm saying. All right. So let's get into the comics today. We got Devil's Reign X-Men, like I said, and X-Men #9. Let's start with Devil's Reign X-Men, because it's the smaller of the two, quieter of the two. We've got writer Gerry Duggan, art by Phil Noto, letters by Clayton Coles. Okay, and this is it's issue 2 in the series, right? So it's 2 of 3 for this mini that is tied into the Devil's Reign event. Now, for those of you that are not following along with Marvel at large, the Devil's Reign event is basically not what if, it's happening. It's Kingpin says no more superheroes in New York City. Kingpin is the mayor of New York City. He actually, the main thing that spurred him to this, that really set him over the edge to like go full on Civil War on this, is he realized he used to know Daredevil's identity, but he like doesn't anymore. Like he realized that information has been stolen from him, which is the thing that happens in the Charles Soule run with the Purple Children. Okay, we know Daredevil's identity was kind of varying states of out of the bag throughout the 2000s, starting with the Bendis and Malieve classic storyline Out, which is very, very good stuff in early 2000s Marvel Knights Daredevil stuff. And ever since then, right, it's been kind of in, out, going both ways. Mark Waid finally kind of put it back in the bag, right? Mark Waid, during his run with Chris Samnee, they said, all right, actually, let's keep the secret identity secret again. The way that was explained then going into the Charles Soule run was it was the Purple Man's children, the Purple Children, are kind of the ones that did this on behalf of Daredevil, so that, like, everyone forgets Matt Murdock is Daredevil, which caused complications at the time, okay? So that is the deal. That is the deal with Devil's Reign. Is now Kingpin is saying, okay, all superheroing is outlawed. It is illegal in New York City, which is, of course, where most superheroes live. How do the X-Men fit into that? Well, in issue number 1, they set up a superhero treehouse in New York City. So, like, that was a thing. They were, the Thunderbolts, Kingpin's Thunderbolts, who are basically his superhero cops, showed up trying to kick the X-Men out, but they have to tread carefully with the X-Men these days, because if you just tell them, get out of here, you're messing with a international incident, right? You're messing with an international incident in a way that didn't used to be the case, right? If this is pre-Krakoa, Kingpin's, henchies are just throwing all these mutants in jail, right? I don't think any questions asked. But now it's a problem, right? So Emma comes in with the goods. Emma says, no, you can't actually do anything. We've got the UN support, yada, yada. Issue 2 now is kind of now like, okay, we've got like a political behind the scenes war, an information war between Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and Emma Frost, okay? And what Kingpin is doing is he's framing Emma for murder, all right? Classic Kingpin move, right? He's got the information, he's got the photos, he's got the juice. He's going to say, actually, Emma killed. Now, what is interesting, I think, about this particular issue and this approach is X-Men, or rather Emma and Kingpin, according to Duggan, now have a fairly long history. They have an established history together that is not really present in like old X-Men comics. But Duggan is doing some retrospective, I wouldn't even call it retconning. He's kind of just filling in some details of things that could have happened. And this issue is primarily a flashback. It's primarily a flashback to like the 1980s Emma Frost, full on in the Hellfire Gala Club, White Queen, just crushing lingerie all the time, looking good and knowing it, but doing like, she's doing work for the Kingpin during this era, okay? Not because she wants to be, but because she kind of has to, right? And we had seen how she kind of rescues Lord Chantel. That comes from the Marauders run with Duggan pulling a really, really nice, literally classic X-Men. That's the series title, Classic X-Men. I think it's issue, was it number 8 maybe? The holiday party with the Hellfire Gala. There's this mutant who apparently dies, Lord Chantel. Duggan retconned that in Marauders to say, no, she didn't die. Emma saved her and brought her to the Kingpin for protection, essentially. All right. So so all of that ties Emma and the Kingpin together. And what I appreciate here about Devil's Reign X-Men is, listen, is this super essential for Devil's Reign, like as an event? No, it's definitely not. Okay. If you just want to know what's happening in Devil's Reign, you read the core series, you read the Chip Zdarsky written Woman Without Fear, and maybe Superior 4. Okay, maybe that, but that's about it. Devil's Reign X-Men, it's more X-Men than it is Devil's Reign, which is fine if that's what you're here for, like which most of you are. That's going to be okay, right? So here you go. You got Emma and Kingpin in this war, sort of trying to. Kingpin wants to get back at her because she made him look dumb. Emma wants to, not be arrested for murder. And it's kind of this flashback story showing what happened. So what I appreciate about this is Duggan is using the Devil's Reign landscape and using that as an excuse to build off Marauders and Emma's ties to Kingpin and flashback to those days. I mean, that's all this is. That's all this is. It's an excuse to build on something fairly interesting that was set up in Marauders, to give a focus on Emma, who, again, even during the Hellfire Gala days, even during the straight up super villainous days, is relative, like has a nice moral center, right? We see her more interested in protecting children, at least in the short term, than Elektra, right? Who's just out here doing her assassination thing. She has some really nice moments and some great visuals here from Phil Noto with symbiote costume, black costume era Spidey, who just happened to be swinging by eating a hamburger, and Emma pulls him in. It's a lot of fun. It's very, there's a lot right now that Marvel's doing with flashback and legacy issues. Okay, Marvel's leaning pretty hard right now into serving up like, oh, here's a story from an era that you used to love, playing to nostalgia, playing to what I would say is the more conservative viewpoints in comics. Now, I love old comics, right? Don't get me wrong, but we had them; they happened. I'm here now. I want to move forward. Um, X-Men Legends, right, is the best example of what type of approach I'm talking about here. Just straight up, we're going to the old creators you liked. We're gonna have them fill in stories from the era you liked, and nothing is really additive, right? There's a ton, like there's a whole Peter David wing of comics that are coming out in this exact same vein. Just like, hey, go revisit this era, go revisit this character. What I like about what's happening here with Kingpin and Emma is it's integrated into something that is current. It's integrated, like I have no problem with flashback stories that are additive that then build to something happening in the moment. That type of storytelling can work great in Marvel Comics and frequently does, and I think in this issue, it really does. It's a nice addition to like who was Emma during this time period. What was she doing? What kind of things might have she been getting into aside from what we see in the Dark Phoenix saga, which is obviously like the Claremont and Byrne classic, right? So all things considered, like I think it's a nice comic. I think if you're into the stuff Duggan and Noto did previously on, I mean, they've worked together on a bunch of stuff, but like on Cable, you'll like the general style, the humor of it. I actually think like both issues today, Devil's Reign X-Men and X-Men #9, Duggan's hitting on the humor. I think these are pretty funny comics. They're well paced. They're just, if you like the Marvel universe, if you like these characters, if you like X-Men, like Emma Frost, then like this is fairly enjoyable. Is it crazy essential? No, but it's fairly enjoyable. Now the Krakoan for issue #3 reads Stand Trial, which obviously Emma's going to do. She gets arrested at the end of this by Union Jack. So yeah, it's good stuff. I got no complaints with Devil's Reign X-Men. Again, like it's perfectly fun. Now I was actually and I see a question here related to something I just talked about. I was more excited by X-Men #9. I really liked X-Men #9, so I'll throw that out there. I want to hear opinions about X-Men #9, as well as again just topics, comments, questions, all that fun stuff. But let's see what we got next. Okay, so I see a question here. Quick opinion on David's Symbiote Spider-Man. So again, like Peter David's got like a whole wing right now of like Marvel miniseries where he gets to sort of revisit some classics and things that he'd written in the past. He's got Symbiote Spider-Man. He did revisiting Maestro. Obviously, is popular from the Hulk Future Imperfect comics with George Perez, which wishing George Perez and his family the best during these tough times. But he killed it, as he always does on Future Imperfect. If you haven't read that before, one of my favorite Hulk stories. Yeah, I don't have much time for Symbiote Spider-Man. It seems like the kind of story that like it's actually weird and kind of interesting. It's just like it's not weird enough to be special, like it's not like this out of continuity DC Black Label-esque like really interesting exploration of something that you wouldn't typically see in mainline Marvel. It feels like a regular Marvel in continuity type comic, but it's just not. It's just in the past. It's got weird stuff going on with Kang, with Rocket Raccoon, and of course Symbiote Spider-Man. I mean, I don't know. I just like I'm all that stuff just feels very regressive to me. It just feels, and again, it's like if I'm hankering for Peter David written comics, like I've got options in the Marvel universe. I can go back and reread the Incredible Hulk run with Todd McFarlane. There's some really good stuff there. You can read his start to X Factor in the early '90s, especially with Larry Stroman. Like when Larry Stroman's on that book, it starts out really interesting in the early '90s, and then of course coming back to X Factor with the Madrock North series in the mid 2000s. Like there's good stuff in there. There's a catalog. There's a library. There's a lot of bad stuff in there too. But do I need to revisit that voice on a Symbiote Spider-Man series? Like, no, I don't know. Yeah, it just doesn't. It's not for me. I think if it's the kind of like, I don't know. Like on one hand, like I'm always saying, like it's totally fine to just have comics that aren't for you, right? Um, I guess I'm just sort of annoyed by this general approach of Marvel, which seems to be really catering towards like just sort of like nostalgia and antiquated ideas of what comics are or can be or should be, as opposed to actually, and again, like the word progressive obviously has a lot of meanings, but like I believe modern comics should be progressive. They should be like it is one grand story in the Marvel universe from continuity, right? Running it back to Fantastic Four #1, it is one grand superhero universe story. I like seeing that story continue to progress, and to do different things and to change, because when you've read so much of that story, it's very boring to reread it. It's very boring to see it played out again. That gets tired, right? So that's what I look for primarily in Marvel Comics. And I think X-Men #9 is honestly an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea of kind of how to do that in some ways, how to not do it in others. But I think it's a pretty good comic here. So okay, so let's talk X-Men #9. I'm actually seeing the comment here. So there's a scene in X-Men #9 where Abigail Brand is just hanging with Orcus, right? And we know from the end of the Al Ewing written sword that Abigail Brand is like joining up with Orcus. Like that was the big, reveal there, was like basically she's playing all sides. She's the triple agent where it's like, are her loyalties with Sword? Are they with Orcus? Are they with herself? And probably that, but we don't totally know. But I'm seeing the comment here from JJ. I was surprised Nimrod did not kill Abigail Brand in X-Men today, because she's half mutant. That's an interesting question. Or that's an interesting comment, actually. Now Nimrod is, I think, sentient and capable enough that they aren't just like a sentinel, who's just gonna like, well, there's some mutant in there, so they're off, off with their heads. But it was funny to just kind of see Brand just hanging out with Orcus and the mutant extermination squad, and seeming very comfortable. I think she's still even wearing her like Sword X-Men jacket. She doesn't even have like an Orcus costume. So that is kind of interesting. I mean, the reasons Orcus would allow that, if you will, would bring her in, is because Brand has all the information, right? I mean, Brand is an incredible asset to Orcus in terms of knowing the insides of not just Krakoa, but like the whole cosmic plan, the whole space-based plan that mutant kind has right now in Marvel. I mean, literally no one knows more about that than Abigail Brand. So they'd be crazy to say no. But obviously, with a character like Brand, again, like being the Nick Fury of space, you obviously have to keep one eye open and try to get a feel for like, okay, is this real, or is she duping us as well? Question here from Banksy: are they intentionally keeping Omega Sentinel out due to her shunning of humans in Inferno? I don't think Orcus knows about that. If you're asking the question about is Orcus keeping Omega Sentinel out, I think Duggan and team are intentionally keeping Omega Sentinel out because she's such a major player, and we know so much about what her role is going to be from Inferno that they're just like avoiding that until the situation is right. And we see this there's a chart of like the Orcus hierarchy, right, of the leadership of Orcus, and we've seen this played out in a few issues. This is the most detail we've ever gotten, and we see like a bunch of leaders laid out, okay, and some we've seen before, some we haven't. We see Abigail Brand on there now. We see Gerry Duggan's new characters, Dr. Stasis and Fei Long, on there. And we see Director Devo like in the center. Like Omega Sentinel's not in this, right? She's not a part of this. We know Omega Sentinel's actually in the center of that Orcus chart, right? Is actually dictating and directing everything that's happening here. I think that's more just about the comic being like, yeah, that's kind of too big a card to drop, but we'll give you Nimrod. We'll give you Nimrod. And honestly, that was pretty cool. Honestly, that was really cool, right? Like, Gerry Duggan is doing the work here. All right, so we got writer Gerry Duggan, we got art by Cia Filla, we got colors by Marty Gracia, letters by Clayton Coles, okay? In X-Men #9, Duggan is doing the work. He is building Orcus. And this comic is like, it's kind of all over the place, but it's all over the place in a way that I think X-Men comics can sometimes be at their best at when they're doing. Like, it's one of the things that I've been celebrating so much in the Vita Ayala Router Ice run, of New Mutants, which is like this comic had 4 threads. They all worked together, and somehow it was only one issue. Like, and we get so many just hyper decompressed comics, especially on the Marvel side, where it's like when you actually get a lot of storylines and different character work done in the same issue, it can be a mess, but sometimes it can be amazing. I think this comic was like 3/4 great, and then like a quarter of it, I felt like it was kind of messy and kind of shoehorned in. And that was actually the Gambit and Rogue stuff with Destiny, but those scenes are super fun, and it has some of the funniest and most memorable moments. So like all in all, it kind of works. But like yeah, what this issue does, and it sets it up on the first page, is like it's doing perspectives of basically the 3 power players in the X-Men verse. It's doing the X-Men, the Quiet Council of Krakoa. It's doing Orcus and their leadership that's being built out, and it's doing Arakko and Mars, and that's a lot. That's a lot to play with. It's a very Hickmanian, I think, approach to an issue of X-Men, where you're like, who are the power players? What are they debating? What are they discussing behind closed doors around circular tables about what to do next about this whole situation, right? And it's kind of setting up like there is a brewing war between mutant kind and Orcus. Like clearly this thing is coming, So you have Krakoa and the Quiet Council voting on, do we engage? Do we go to war with Orcus? You have Arakko doing the same, and being obviously this warfaring people that need to be fleshed out and explored and explained a heck of a lot more, I think. And then you have Orcus kind of doing the same thing of like, okay, like Dr. Stasis, revealed to a reporter that about mutant resurrection protocols. Why is that not out yet? Kind of what is the plan there? So like it's everyone scheming all at the same time. This stuff's really interesting to me. I think it's done fairly well here. And again, like, I was pretty hard on critical of Duggan's X-Men run to begin, right? And Pepe Larraz and Marta Gracia have been doing amazing work throughout some of these issues, as has Javier Pina. Like the art has been very, very consistently great. But I was definitely critical of like, oh, we're just regressing to like a standard superhero comic. Like we're just doing big superhero battles with the X-Men team. Like that's not what had me the most excited about this era. Like that was stuff we had for decades and decades, right? But what I think has happened over the last handful of issues is it's starting to become clear, like we can do that and we can build out this war with Orcus in a way that no one else has done. And I think that's the piece where I'm like, oh, okay, like Duggan is the one who's giving us leadership of Orcus and what they're like and what their schemes are. These details did not exist. These characters literally did not exist. But like we don't have details about much inside of Orcus. We know Nimrod a bit. We get some time with Dr. Aaliyah Gregor, obviously. And we saw obviously Omega Sentinel's plans. But like Director Devo is a nothing. Director Devo is just a blank shell. Duggan building out a Phalanx and Dr. Stasis gives us some enemies to grab onto, some enemies to get to know, right? And get a feel for like, who are they? What do they do? And that's important and that's essential, so it's like it's a Hickmanian issue in some senses, like if Hickman wrote this issue, if he was still on X-Men, I'd have been into it. I'd have been like, yeah, this is a good issue of X-Men. Which I don't want Gerry Duggan doing a Jonathan Hickman impersonation because that's not the writer he is, right? That's not the type of creator he is. And this issue is not that. It's funnier than Hickman typically gets, and it has some character moments that are warmer, I think, than Hickman typically gets, right? So there's good stuff there as well. It's also a Claremontian issue, which is obviously like the ultimate compliment for an X-Men creator, but it's like Chris Claremont issues of X-Men, especially post-Byrne, especially post the mid-'80s, would just go on these wild tangents with a million threads, right? And somehow kind of all come together. And an issue like this is kind of doing a similar thing. And there's an art to it. There's an art to throwing out boatloads of threads, boatloads of plot lines, and having it all feel coherent and having it all feel like one story. And X-Men #9 pulls it off. So, I mean, yeah, like I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is excellent stuff. But, I talked last week, like if X-Men is your 4th or 5th best comic in the X line, this line rules, right? And like that's kind of the hope, right? Is this comic continues to be increasingly steady, increasingly solid. And I think we're seeing things come together too, where it was like, okay, the X-Men fighting MODOK, why do we care? Well, That's kind of interesting if you consider MODOK post-human, if you consider the types of relationships he might have with Orcus or they might have with Orcus, like that's different stuff that you can do. And you start building all that. If X-Men's like the fourth best book in the line, and X-Men Red pays off, and Immortal X-Men pays off, and New Mutants continues to be great, like that's a really good top, portion of your X-Men line of comics. Again, looking at historically how many good X-Men comics are there typically at the same time, that would continue to place this era well above like where it has been historically. So it's easy, I think, to criticize this run early, and certainly I did, and I stand by the general concerns there. I don't think those comics are like extraordinary, and I think at the time, as this sort of perceived flagship book, that was the hope, right? That was still the dream, and it still is in a lot of ways. But if you kind of lower those expectations, which now I have, right, this book is hitting, I think, in some pretty important ways. And there's a lot going on here that is very connective with the rest of what's been going on in the Krakoa era. So we can talk about those details here as well, because I mean, again, there's a lot to it. All right. One of the kind of surprising threads here in X-Men #9 was the Arakko conversation is about, okay, do we go to war? And they're all voting on that. And as they're doing so, it's brought up that like Redroot, the Doug of the Arakko nation from Ten of Swords, was captured and is still in Otherworld, right? Redroot's been in Otherworld since Ten of Swords. Nothing has changed there. Storm basically puts it to like, hey, do we want to go rescue Redroot? Like, should we bother getting the voice of Arakko? And there's a general malaise about that. Tarn the Uncaring starts to say, I don't care, classic Tarn. And then Arakko just bonks him on the head, right? And clearly is interested in Redroot being brought back to the fold. So I like that it connected back to Ten of Swords. I like the idea that Redroot still needs to be rescued from Mad Jim Jaspers. I'm not necessarily crazy about what gets tossed in here as the way it might happen, which is Sunfire going to Otherworld as part of the Knights of X, maybe in an effort to rescue Redroot. So Sunfire has had like two moments basically in this X-Men run. The first one was like all out throwdown with Fei Long on Phobos. That was cool. And then in this one, he's just like crafting shirtless on the moon of Mars, talking about how he wants to go cosmic, right? Talking about how like, and I think maybe this is reflective of like the Remender Uncanny Avengers stuff, actually, about like how cosmic Sunfire can get. It basically just being like, yeah, I'm gonna go like, soar the spaceways and do my Sunfire thing. I actually would rather read that than Shiro going to Otherworld. I actually think Cosmic Sunfire sounds really, really cool. So it sounded like my takeaway from the comic was like, well, that's not going to happen now because Sunfire is actually going to go to Otherworld. I don't know how. If he was on a solo mission, that'd be cool. I'm assuming he's going to be part of like the Knights of X storylines and stuff, but needs to like go rescue Redroot, which kind of feels like a downgrade, actually. I think as opposed to like whatever Cosmic Sunfire thing we might have been seeing. But I am interested in just like in Redroot being rescued and sort of what that stuff looks like. Because again, like the interesting things that came out of Ten of Swords, there's a lot of interesting things actually. But two of the biggest ones that I'm most interested in are still developing Arakko and these characters, because it's really cool and they're all pretty interesting. And playing with Otherworld as a concept and as this world that like was nothing, was like just King Arthur medieval times stuff, and is now like really massive and really fleshed out. So it's like there's a lot to do there. There's a lot that can be done there. Will we actually see it in X-Men? Probably not. We'll probably see it in Knights of X. But that was out there. I did also think like, so I didn't realize for most of this issue that it wasn't Pepe Larraz. It was only when I went back and looked at the credits, I was like, oh yeah, this is Cia Villa. Marta Gracia is absolutely the hero of this book. Gracia's like consistent coloring, maintaining continuity of color and tone and feel. It has made like my biggest fear with this X-Men run was, okay, Duggan's kind of doing a classic superhero thing. The second Larraz steps off this thing, it's going to feel just like absolutely trite and derivative. And that has not happened, which is a credit to the artists that have filled in, Ciaville and Harvey Pina. But I think Marty Grassi is the one who sells that, like, this is a coherent thing. This is a run that all feels of a piece. So often, and it's not just X-Men, like so often on Marvel runs or superhero runs in general, you get fill-in artists, quickly into a run, and it just breaks the sense of continuity and the sense of just like creators doing a thing together, of collaborating and having a vision together. And you don't get that on X-Men. And I think that's mostly because of Gracia. So absolutely credit there, because like that's a hard thing to pull off. And it seems to be happening here. So, but yeah, I mean, otherwise, like again, we got MODOK in the fold. That's actually going to be interesting. The Krakoan for the next issue reads Wolverine, which I presume to just mean it's going to be a Laura focused issue. And yeah, like it's been more good than not, kind of since Inferno started, I would say. It's not like an all-time classic run, but it's doing what it does very well. So let's talk next about the Gambit and Rogue and Destiny stuff, because that was the piece of it that I thought didn't work super well narratively, but was fun. All right. So Rogue and Gambit go on a trip here they're going into space and they're trying to figure out what's the deal with Game World, right? If you remember back to the early issues of X-Men, in Game World, they're all just like betting on how to destroy Earth, how to destroy, the mutants essentially. And the X-Men team, that's where they get their superhero bona fides. They step in and they're like, we're gonna defend the planet again, right? Because we're heroes. So Rogue and Gambit are investigating like what's the deal with all that, and they show up at like a space bar where Destiny just happens to be hanging out and drinking. It's the first time, I think, in these comics that we've seen Rogue and Destiny interact. Destiny is Rogue's, adoptive mother, along with Mystique. So they have like a long-standing familial relationship, which is interesting and is played for great comedic effect here because Destiny is the very disapproving mother-in-law of Gambit, who they also have not interacted since Rogue and Gambit got married, and Destiny just hates Gambit. And it's pretty great. Like, it's very funny. I didn't think these bits... here's why they especially didn't fit. You have a very distinct issue set up with three perspectives, right? The first page, again, declares we've got the Quiet Council, we've got Arakko, the Great Ring, and we've got Orcus. Those are the three perspectives. And then we get a weird fourth. Then we get an oddball fourth about Rogue and Gambit doing their thing in Destiny. It should have been in a different issue. I think there's plenty here. There's plenty of meat on the bone to have explored those three perspectives. Just kind of bounce between like the different conversations and the different perspectives and the different way they're coming at these issues. Rogue and Gambit in this issue does not make sense. That said, they're really fun scenes. They're well done. I think they should have been a different issue. So let's hear some more about that. But let's see. I'm seeing a question here. Would you say this run has more ups than downs? That's tricky. Because again, like I was really not that into the first 4 or 5 issues of it. Like I was pretty bored by that. So I would say it's starting to even out. And that's why I'm talking positively about it. And now kind of wondering, like the card for this video, like the YouTube card was like, is the run actually underrated now? Because it was such kind of a step back, and it was such a regression to, okay, X-Men are a superhero team, I get it. That now that it's actually like coming together more and feeling feeling like its own book. Now it's actually like, this book's actually solid. This book's actually like kind of worth checking out. And it consistently looks pretty good. So I would still say at this point more downs than ups, but I expect by the time we get to issue 12, it'll be like basically like the slate's clean. You can do whatever you want from here. All right, let's see. What other questions we got? All right. All right, get in some questions, get in some thoughts. I'm going to answer as many as I can. But otherwise, again, like short comics week, no X Live, so we don't have major event stuff going on. The other thing I want to hear? I want to hear, what are some of your favorite comics of this year? Again, like I've got some time off coming up, which I'm excited about, and I'm going to be really trying to dig into the new stuff that's come out in 2022. What are my favorites? As I can start to work on the early version of the CBH list, which I like to keep a running counter on. and I'm way behind on so many things. So I want to hear, like, what are some of your favorite comics? It can be X-Men, it can be Marvel, it can be totally not. It can be anything. Get them in the comments, get them in the threads. Any ideas or comics you think I might not have heard of or I might not be into yet? That's what I'm probably most interested in. Any focus on Black Panther #4 with Storm? I'm seeing. I haven't read it yet. What happens? Anything good? Is it important stuff, or is it just Black Panther and Storm hanging out and being lovey-dovey, which is nice, but maybe not important. I don't care if you spoil it here. I will not be offended. All right. I'm seeing the Eternals rolling in. Yeah, the Eternals has definitely been. I mean, that was so. I've got 2020 carryovers or 2021 carryovers. What even is time? Rolling into 2022, I've definitely got a number of those. Eternals is one of those for sure. I actually don't, because of the way Destiny of X is coming, there's really nothing from the X-Men line that would carry over from last year into this year and still be among my favorites. Like there's, I guess New Mutants, actually. New Mutants would be the one. So maybe New Mutants goes on the list as a carryover. But otherwise, I kind of think that's the only option at this point because everything else is resetting. Like Sword would have been because I love that book, but it's becoming X-Men Red. So, all right, we did have a super chat here. Thanks so much for getting this in. Let's see. I wonder why the X-Men can have decimation reversed and have forward momentum while Spidey still not allowed to progress due to one more day retcon. How come there's a big contrast between Marvel's two big icons? Okay, so let's break this down. I mean, first off, like the X-Men having forward momentum after decimation took almost 15 years. So like a long process, right? To get the post-decimation era to House of X and Powers of 10, right? And I mean, for that kind of like turnover from a thing that really colors what the franchise is and really dictates the kind of stories you can tell, you really just need that magic of editorial acceptance, creative vision, and that's it, I think. And that's what House of X and Powers of 10 is. It's creative vision, Jonathan Hickman and collaborators, and it's editorial acceptance saying, go ahead, do it. Go ahead. Change X-Men. Do the thing, right? Those are the two elements that you need. I think with Spider-Man, there's perpetually more of a fear to change things like that, which is why we have, so the one more day retcon, for those who don't know, is Spider-Man was growing up. Like he was an adult, he was a teacher, he was married to Mary Jane, and they went through troubles and they were back together again. Aunt May died for the thousandth millionth time in post Civil War, and he was really mad about that. And then he goes and there's the whole one more day, which is I don't even want to talk about it, but Mephisto basically he makes everyone forget that Peter Parker Spider-Man, that happens in Civil War, and Spider-Man's marriage dissolves. And basically what it allows editorially, what it allows narratively is they got to say, okay, Spider-Man's young again. Spider-Man's young and hip and alone and poor, and let's do that. Which actually isn't that different than the way like No Way Home ends, if you think about it. Spoilers, sorry, some of you might still not have seen that. So okay, so why isn't Spider-Man doing that? I mean, I think Marvel is always. I just think they're more uptight about what they do with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the franchise, right? In a way that like X-Men is, but there's no individual face to it. Like Spider-Man is the face of Marvel. Spider-Man is on Marvel's checks, or was stuff like that. I was amazed when we went. I went to the Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry. They had a Marvel exhibit. Maybe they still do. This was late last year. I took my dad for Father's Day, and they had a poll that was like, "Who's your favorite Marvel superhero?" or something like that. And I was trying to guess with my dad. I was like, "All right, who's going to be on the list? Like, who's going to be the top?" And number one, we're like, "Okay, Spider-Man." Right? Like that would probably be most people's number one. And then we kind of went down the list, but like because X-Men is a team, they don't necessarily rank in the same way. Plus, they haven't had the actual MCU boost. Like X-Men actually haven't had the biggest boost they're gonna get. Obviously, it'll happen eventually. Number two on the list, by the way, was Black Panther. which was really cool to see and would so not have been the case at any point before that movie came out. But that was pretty cool. So all right. So I mean, yeah, is Spidey gonna progress? I mean, yeah, they're trying to do things with this Beyond Corporation stuff. It's actually pretty aggressive. Or actually pretty progressive if you think about it. I'm again like Zeb Wells coming off of Hellions, he's gonna write Amazing Spider-Man. Good for him, right? Just proved he could write one of the best X-Men runs. I think he's gonna do a great job on Spider-Man. I'm not jazzed about John Romita Jr. back again because talk about regression, right? Like a legend, yes. Like so much history in the Romita family with Marvel, but it's like there are other artists. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just uptightness. I think it's just like editorial acceptance is harder to garner with Spider-Man. And I've talked about this a bunch, like on here and on Twitter and wherever. But it's like the idea of do House of X Spider-Man, right? What would that be? What would a big blow up? Do it the right way. Do it huge. Do it different. Immortal Hulk Spider-Man. Like that kind of like creative vision where it's just something new. It's something fun and different. What would that even be? There's a lot of different cool ideas. I just think with Spidey, it's like it's harder to sell. I think it's harder to sell, and I think probably the creative vision part of that probably is not lacking. I bet you have a lot of creators who have a lot of really cool ideas for what to do with that character. I bet you just don't have as much acceptance about what you can do, with the franchise. So that's my theory on that. Not based on anything, but that's the theory. All right, let's go back and look at some of these awesome comics that people are recommending because I want to see what people are digging. Let's see. Saga is back. Saga, you might not have heard, still good. Saga's still good. I'm actually a little behind on Saga. I don't think I ever read the last arc before it went on hiatus. And I just haven't gotten around to it. I should do that sometime. I had time. I had plenty of time to catch up and finish Saga. I chose not to, but I did love seeing that in my pull back at the comic shop. Honestly, I was impressed that my comic shop remembered I was pulling Saga, 3 years later, right? Because it's been that long in between issues. Maybe they just assume that for everyone who's been pulling books with them forever, right? They just like, maybe they like Saga. Because sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they'll like sneak in comics to my pull list, and I'm like, I I do not remember getting Swamp Thing, but turns out Ron V is amazing, and I already knew that, so sure, I'll just keep reading Swamp Thing, right? Just like, okay, and then all of a sudden I'm collecting Swamp Thing. Um, by the way, Swamp Thing's good. All right, let's see. Yeah, I'm seeing the comment. Spider-Man's too precious to Marvel. I mean, I think so. I think that's probably true. It's why you're not going to get until like things would need to go further south. Like that's the thing is like you might feel, and I feel a certain stagnation, a certain lack of excitement around Spider-Man comics. But that said, like that's most of Spider-Man's history, actually. like is just like consistent Spidey stuff and not big, amazing. Like if you look at like the hits per inning for Spider-Man is a very low ratio. And I like Peter Parker is my favorite comic character. I love Spider-Man. The hits per inning for Spider-Man is bad. Like it's bad. There's just so much output and so little truly special stuff. Craven's Last Hunt is an exception to the rule, right? Like the great Spidey stuff is an exception to with the exception obviously of the beginnings of Stan and Steve and John Romita in the first, I think it's 104 issues plus the annuals, right? Like, but anyway, that's kind of what's going on with Spidey, and that's we could go for Spidey for days. Thoughts on Hickman Bocello Moon Knight? Yeah, so Hickman's as expected. Jonathan Hickman's next Marvel project will be a Moon Knight anthology. Is it black and white? Is that what it is? Black and white Moon Knight with Chris Bocello. They've worked together before on Spider-Man Full Circle. Clearly, Hickman's expressed admiration for Bocello a bunch, which, of course, excuse me. I mean, I'll read it. They're going to do some future Moon Knight thing, but it's like it's a part of an anthology. Hopefully it's cool, but it's a short story. I'm not that jazzed about it. I'm not like, oh my gosh, I got to get this day one kind of thing. I don't know. It just feels small, I suppose. Like I'm actually, I listen, we do Hickman every week, so like I don't want to sink too much time into this, but um, I'm increasingly not like I'm increasingly thinking Hickman's Marvel tenure from here on out is going to be incredibly limited, like incredibly limited. Like he is so in on Three Moons, Three Worlds with Substack and this whole thing. Like that is like he's building a publishing company, which like all of them kind of are. You know, you have James Tynion doing similar stuff. But like Hickman, Del Mundo, Mike Huddleston, they just hired Stephen Wacker as their editor in chief. Like they're building a legitimate, like kind of known entity, like as a publishing company. That's where the thinking is going. That's where the storytelling's going. That's where the time has to be going. You know, at the end of the day, just like how much time do you even have? Um, I'd be very surprised if and I was this way from the get-go, you know, so like mark me down on this one. Like he's not gonna come in and do a run. It's not happening. All right. Would I love it? Yeah, of course. I wanted the X-Men run to keep going. But like he's not gonna come in and do a run on a character. That's why I think the Black Label idea is still the best idea I've had for how you could use somebody as talented as that. Right? You have him come in, you start off your Marvel Black Label line, call it Blue Label, I don't care. Right? Call it Marvel, whatever. And it's just going to be your out of continuity. You write cool out of continuity graphic novel. You do one, you're done. He can step away for a while and focus on Three Moons, Three Worlds, which is clearly the thing he cares about right now. And it's the thing he's getting paid to do the most. You know, I don't know what Marvel pays him, but like those Substack creators got bank. Good for them. So anyway, I'm not that excited about Black and White Anthology. I think it's funny. I mean, the follow ups after that interview of Hickman being like, Marvel doesn't pay me to write, you know, ongoing X-Men comics, and then the thinking of like, oh, he's going to be on Doctor Strange, or oh, he's going to take over Spider-Man, and then it's like, what are the two things he's done? He did a super lame Infinity Scroller comic with a very, very derivative Wolverine story, and now he's going to do a short story about a Moon Knight future with Chris Pichello, which will probably be cool, but again, it's like a short story anthology, right? So like, I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath for anything big or cool. Unless he's, you know, I don't know. He's so in on this Three World, Three Moon thing. Even the ideas of like, oh, he'll curate and run an alternate universe with Donny Cates or whatever and stuff like that. Like, would that be fun? Yeah. Does that get, you know? But then it's going to be like, well, he's like the producer. You know, when you get like, oh, Christopher Nolan exec produced, you know, whatever, Man of Steel. It's like, okay, but it's not his movie, right? It's Zack Snyder's, right? So it's like, I would have those doubts as well, frankly. I'm seeing the question here: is Three Worlds, Three Moons that successful? No, but like that's the thing about the Substack comics is none of them are successful, but they all got paid up front, so who cares if you're them? None of them are like crazy. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not successful. It might be succeeding in whatever metrics they're deeming them, but like readership and output right now is super low. It's like it's early days for these things. But they already got the money. They got paid up front. Now they get to build their publication houses and do comics however the hell they want. It's an amazing opportunity. Like from a creative perspective, it is the best opportunity I've ever heard of for comics creators. Like I would say it's already successful if you're the individuals because you got to try the thing, you get to do it, and then you know you'll see if people like it, right? And these comics are all going to hit print eventually. You know, they're all going to get out there, and then readership will grow, and people will be like, oh, are these actually good or not? At this point, we don't even know. You know, it's like we don't even know if these are going to be that good. I mean, I read a bunch of them, but it's like, anyway, that's a whole tangent. All right, which is what this is at this point. This is tangents. So get in your get in your tangenty questions, and I will address what I can. Do you think Krakoa has replaced Xavier's school? Yeah, for sure. That said, you know, I would like to see actual school on Krakoa. You know, the New Mutants have kind of been doing that in Ayala's run and actually training and coaching and schooling younger mutants. But again, it's like, I mean, again, this is one of the things about Krakoa where you can take all these cultural and societal norms and do them your own way because you can decide, well, what should that mean for mutant kind? What should that look like? So you can do what mutant schools should look like. Yeah, I'm here for it. Right? I'm out of school. I don't spend that much time there anymore. I can spend some time reading about what it might be like for mutants on this island. But absolutely, I mean, Xavier's school is literally overrun, which we see in the giant-sized Nightcrawler, with Sidri aliens. So we're not going back there anytime soon. Also, if they start a school on Krakoa, I hope it's not called Xavier's. Name it after almost anybody else, and I would be better off with that. All right. Yeah. Here's a good question actually. I thought they were gonna do Elseworld type runs like Zdarsky's Shadow of the Spider. And there's this weird what if today instead. I haven't read the what if, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, like Chip Zdarsky wrote this Spider Shadow, right? It's a 6 issue, and it took the concept of Marvel What If and was like, what if we made it cool collected graphic novels with 6 issues? And they did it really well, right? It's him and I think Pascal Ferry. And it's a good comic. I dig it. Um, it's weird that there's not more of that. I a million percent agree. We were just talking about this on the My Marvelous Year podcast, I think, myself and Charlotte. But it's like, it's strange that there haven't been more of those. I'm baffled, truly, by Marvel's lack of just like, yeah, like out of continuity, like like clearly built for graphic novel, prestige style type storytelling. I'm baffled in a number of ways. One, because people would eat it up. Two, because they love chasing DC. They can't stop themselves from chasing DC. Yet DC launched Black Label like what, like 4 years ago now, and Marvel hasn't come up with an equivalent. It's baffling. I don't know why. I don't know what world we wouldn't want to see Marvel be like, hey, with our Rolodex and our finances, who wants to come write their out of continuity, X-Men story, their out of continuity Spider-Man story? Like, it's weird to me. I don't know. I'm surprised it's not happening. All right, I'll take like two more questions, and then it is time. But thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate all of you hopping in here. It's super fun coming in and talking comics. I very much appreciate that, especially on a day like today when it feels like there isn't even that much to talk about, but we find a way. We find a way, and I appreciate that you're all here for it. Coming up on comicbookherald.com, we have a billion good things. Honestly, we have like 3 or 4 of the best essays I think I've ever run coming out this month. One of them is going to be about Moon Knight and dissociative identity disorder. It is probably one of the smartest, most interesting pieces I think we've ever had. That's going to come out before the show debuts by the end of this month. Super excited for the show, by the way. Very, very excited for Moon Knight. I have high hopes. My Dave expectations are never wrong when it comes to MCU stuff. Never wrong. Moon Knight's going to be good. Okay, you're hearing it here first. All right, let's see what else is coming up on the CBH channel. If you like and subscribe, you'll keep getting this month, obviously, Casual Krakoa stuff, maybe a Casual Krakoa live from vacation, talking X lives and X deaths. I'm gonna have interviews going up on the channel. All right, so I'm doing all these interviews for the podcast. I've also been recording the videos. We're gonna start dropping those. So we'll have Tim Seeley, we'll have Scott Snyder. I think will be probably the first 2 that I drop on the channel. If you want to hear those, the Scott Snyder one's really interesting too. I had the chance to talk to him like right after the Comixology update changed, and Scott Snyder, all his like new creator-owned stuff is coming out on Comixology Originals first. So that was a pretty interesting conversation, especially with the timing there. BT Dubs, Comixology changes, no good, not the best. So all right, is DeRozan MVP? Listen, if you live within 35. No, I'm not gonna. I was gonna do a miles thing. I don't know how miles work. Yes, if you're in the Chicagoland area, DeMar DeRozan is unquestionably the most valuable player of all time. Sans Jordan, sans Ditka, sans some others. He's incredible. I'm loving the Bulls. We're not even healthy. And we're this good. It's incredible. I'm still seeing a lot of shade. Still seeing like, oh, maybe we're the 5th or 6th best in the East if everybody's healthy and everybody's together. I get it. I understand it. Love this team. Absolutely love this team. I hope everybody gets healthy so we get a real shot to make a run here in the playoffs. I would love us, honestly. I'd listen to. I think the Bulls are actually going to win the finals. No. But second round, let's get the Sixers. Let's see James Harden in the playoffs. Let's see him melting down. And then we'll get destroyed by Embiid and still lose. But like, I want to be there for the Bulls being the ones to make Harden fall apart. I would feel wonderful about that. So absolutely DeRozan for MVP. I'm here for it. It's not going to happen, but I am so here for it. Okay, final question. What are you predicting from X Lives and X Deaths next week? Ooh, I haven't thought about it at all. All right, here's my prediction for X Lives. It's not going to connect to X Deaths. I don't think it's actually going to do it. I think it's just going to keep doing its X Lives things with the Wolverine Omega Red Professor X story. Okay, so that's my prediction there. My prediction for X Deaths clearly is going to be much more difficult. Where did we leave off? We left off with Moira's the ultimate villain. Um, uh, we got Faye Logan hunting her, and we got the reveal of what they're like in the future. Ooh, where's that gonna go? Where is that gonna go? I think my prediction for X Deaths is we will bring Orcus, maybe Omega Sentinel into the fold. That is my prediction for X Deaths number 4. All right. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining live. I very much appreciate it. I will read Black Panther 4. I'm seeing it here. I appreciate that recommendation. But yeah, seriously, thanks. I'll be here every Wednesday after the comics. Again, next week. Listen, we'll try to do that. It's probably easy enough to bring the mic on the road. I could sit in a hotel room maybe, and we could do a quick X Lives, X Death chat. If my kids are jumping on a bed behind me, that's just the way it is. That's just the way these things happen. Okay. Not even with issue 5. No, I do think X Lives it'll have to touch base. By issue number 5, I just think it's gonna be less integrated than it feels like it should. Like I kind of think the integration piece of it was all those little moments of like, Wolverine lying on the table in X Deaths for like a panel, right? Like I think it's not going to be that extensive. Classic Zing, Justin. I love it. Bold to think the 76ers aren't going to collapse all on their own. Zing, we'll see you in round 2. Thanks everybody for listening. And as always, enjoy the comics.